Masechet Sanhedrin, Daf Pe Zayin. We saw the Mishnah about the law of Zaken Mamreh, and now we're going to analyze the Pesukim that are related to it. Let's look at the Pesukim inside first, so we can see the Peshat, and then we'll appreciate how the Midrash expands upon it. The Pesukim say, Ki palem mechad abad mishpat. If there's a matter that you don't know about, it's too wondrous for you. Pele is an interesting word. It can mean a wonder, like a miracle, but it could also mean something that you don't know. So if there's a law, because you don't know how a miracle works, so you're surprised by it. So if there's a law that comes up for you and you don't know what the answer is, whether it's a matter of mishpat, a civil law, or ben dam ledam. In simple reading, ben dam ledam means different types of murder. Is it intentional murder, unintentional? Din ladin, different types of civil law. Nega la nega, in the simple peshat, nega means a blow. Someone injures someone else, hits them. So there's different types and different matters that you have to adjudicate, how much you have to pay in that case. Divrei bisharecha, matters of dispute. So in other words, we're talking about matters of civil and criminal dispute between parties. And if you don't know what the answer is, then you should arise and go to the place that Hashem will choose, which eventually will be Yerushalayim and the Bet HaMikdash. And you'll come to the Kohanim, the Levitical Kohanim, and to the judge. Meaning the Torah is envisioning that the job of the Kohanim is not simply sprinkling blood, but they are integrally involved in the judicial system. So it's Kohanim Halviim Ve'al Shofet, in other words, those Levim or Kohanim, and whoever the judge is, the chief judge, that will be in that time, and they will tell you what the law is. And you must obey what they say when they issue their ruling from that place. Listen to everything they say. Listen to everything they say and don't veer, not right and not left. ואיש אשר יעשה בזדון, לבלתי שמוע לכהן, העמד לשרת שם את אדוני אלוהיך או לשופט, ומת האיש ההוא בירתה הרע מישראל, וכל המשמעו ויראו ולא יזידון עוד. And here's the main part of our law. If there is a person that on purpose, not by mistake, if by mistake he didn't hear what they said, okay, that's not going to be punishable. But if he heard what they said, and on purpose he's rebelling against the court, that's why I call it mamreh, he's rebelling. And the rabbis call him a zaken. He's not called that in the Pesukim. But the point is that he is someone who can threaten the authority of the Sanhedrin because he's a well-respected and well-learned person. So he has to listen to the court. And if he does not do so, and he goes against the court, umet ha'ishahu, he deserves the death penalty. It's an nispedek because he will get the death penalty of Hanek in order to remove that evil from Israel, and everybody will hear about it and will fear, and it'll be a deterrent for anybody else to act that way. So that's the Pesukim. We see that it seems to be focused on civil laws, and also that one gets the death penalty even if it's a matter of just some, do you have to pay this or not? In other words, he gets a death penalty even if the matter that he's ruling on is not a matter of death penalty. It could be something that's much more minor, and do you have to pay this or do you not have to pay? And yet if he goes against the ruling of the Sanhedrin, then he will get the death penalty. Okay, so that's the peshat of the Pesukim. But now we're going to see how the Midrash Halacha is going to expand on it. Tenor Banan. Ki paleh mechad davar b'mufleh shebetin hakatuv medaber. So since it starts ki paleh, again in Peshat that means if a matter is wondrous to you, meaning you don't know what it is. But this Midrash says that this law applies only b'mufleh, but the most distinguished among you. And not just any student that says something against the court, that he shouldn't do that, but there's no death penalty for that. Only ki paleh, only someone who's a distinguished member of the court will get killed. because that person poses a threat. Mimecha ze yoetz, v'chen hu omer, mimech yasa chosheb al Hashem ra'a yoetz beliya'al. Now, what matters are going to be included if he goes against the court that he will get the death penalty? Mimecha, so from each word we're going to learn something else. Mimecha, from you, meaning that is advice. If the Sanhedrin gives a certain amount of advice, and then the elder gives different advice. So what is it talking about? Is it just advice on what stocks to buy? It seems to be specific halachic advice. We're going to see a little bit later. It's going to refer specifically to intercalation of the year, because this requires a lot of wisdom to know when to add a month and when not to add a month. And we know that mimecha is associated with yoetz, because both come up in this pasuk from Nahum that says, "From you, mimech, has emerged who devise evil against Hashem, an advisor of the wicked, yoetz belial." So that's how we bring together mimecha and yoetz. Okay, so that has to do with issues of advice regarding the calendar, for example. Davar zo halacha. Davar will be a matter of halacha, meaning a tradition. That's part of the oral tradition. If the Sanhedrin says this is the oral tradition, and an elder goes against it, then he gets the death penalty. La mishpat ze hadin. Mishpat is a din. That could mean a law, a judgment, or it could mean something that's derived from a gezerah shava, from a kal vachomer, a din. If someone goes against the Sanhedrin said, here's a gezerah shava, then you can't go against it. Ben dam le dam, ben dam nida, dam le da, dam ziva. Between blood and blood means different types of blood. Is this dam nida or not? This will make a big difference if she's permitted to her husband or not, or if she's tameh or tahor. Dam le da, if she gave birth. So for how long do we consider that dam leda, the blood that emerges when giving birth, as a different status from dam nida and dam ziva? We have to calculate. There's 11 and 7 cycle. When a woman is nida, so she's nida for 7 days. Any blood she sees within those 7 days is called dam nida. And then she just has to wait 7 days altogether from the beginning of her period, and then she can go to the mikveh. Whereas ziva is different. After the 7 days is over, any blood she sees in the next 11 days, that is dam ziva, which is much more stringent. If she's 3 days in a row, then she's a zava gedolah. She has to wait 7 clean days. She has to bring a korban, and so you have to know which time period is it. Is it the 7 days of nida or the 11 days of ziva? Ben din ledin, ben din nefashot, din manot, din makot. Din ledin means they have to know, you have to follow the bet din, whether it's talking about a capital case law or monetary case, or a case that will require lashes. In any of these cases, if the elder goes against the Sanhedrin, he gets the death penalty. Benega lenega beniga adam. Nege batim, nege begadim. Nega is referring to leprosy. Whether it's a leprous sore on a person, on a house, or on garments, the Sanhedrin decides what the laws are, and you have to follow their rules, even if it's something like negaim, which is generally not death penalty. But you have to follow them, and if you don't, then the elder gets death penalty. Dibre meaning words. So this is when someone makes a dedication or evaluation or consecration. He does it with speech. He says, I am going to donate my worth to the Bet HaMikdash. So how much do you have to give? What formulas count? So all that, the Sanhedrin tells you what to say, what to do. Matters of dispute. This is going to include the law of sotah, which comes from a dispute between husband and wife. Arifat egla, when you have a murder mystery, that's because of some dispute. Someone killed someone. And tarat mesorah, someone becomes a mesorah because of lashon hara. That's a matter of dispute. And so how do they become pure? Bisharecha zoleket shichecha upe'ah. In your gates, that refers to the gifts that you give to the poor, the gleanings, forgotten sheaves, the corner of the field. And so all those laws, how much do you have to give, when do you have to give it? The Sanhedrin, once they rule about that, then everybody has to follow it, and an elder goes against it. will get chenek. Vekamta mibet din ve'alita melamed shebet hamikdash gavoa me'eretz Yisrael ve'eretz Yisrael gavoa mikol ha'aratzot el hamakom melamed shamakom gorem. Now it says you will rise up, so that means they were sitting before. So that means that they were sitting in a bet din, because in bet din, right, the judges are sitting. In other words, this is referring to a local court that a case comes to them and they're discussing it and they don't know what the answer is. There's a dispute and they can't resolve it. So then they get up from the local court and they go up. So from the fact that it says that we go up to the Bet HaMikdash, that teaches that the Bet HaMikdash is higher than all the rest of the land of Israel. And furthermore, that all the other lands are lower compared to Eretz Yisrael. So wherever you are, you're going to go up to Eretz Yisrael, and if you're in Israel, you're going to go up to the Bet HaMikdash. It's not only physically higher, and is in fact Bet HaMikdash is on a mountain, but also higher spiritually. And you go to the place that teaches that the place is what causes their ruling to be authoritative, and so that you'd kill the Zaken Mamre. What if the Sanhedrin happens to be elsewhere? They went on a clash trip, they had to go do something in a different place, so then they don't have the same authority. Only when they are adjudicating as a Sanhedrin officially from the Lishkat HaGazit, that's when someone goes against them, they are liable to the death penalty. But if it's a different court somewhere else, then they don't have that authority. And although you should always go follow what the court says, the law of Zaken Mamre only applies to the Sanhedrin in the Bet HaMikdash. Bishlama, that's the end of the Baraita. Now we analyze the last part. Bishlama Bet HaMikdash gava me'eretz Yisrael dichtib ve'alita ela eretz Yisrael gava mikol asot minale. We understand that the Bet HaMikdash is higher than all the rest of Israel because it says wherever you are, you're going to go up to the Bet HaMikdash, to the Lishkat HaGazit where the Sanhedrin is. So we're assuming we're talking about people that are in Israel. So wherever you are in Israel, Bet HaMikdash is higher than that. But how do we know? The Baraita said that Israel is higher than all other lands, but we don't see that from this pasuk. So how do we know? Tichtib lachen inei yamim ba'im neum Hashem lo yamer chay Hashem asher ha'ala et bnei Yisrael mes Mitzrayim ki im chay Hashem asher ha'ala v'asher hevi et zera bet Yisrael mesafona mikol arasot asher hiddachtim sham v'yashevu al admatam. This is a pasuk from Yirmiyah that says, therefore days are coming when people will not say, by the life of God who took Bnei Yisrael out of Mitzrayim, meaning that's what we say now. We keep referring to Hashem who took us out of Mitzrayim because we remember that as such a great miracle. But in the future, there's going to be such a bigger miracle that we won't even need to remember. We're not going to refer to the Yetziat Mitzrayim anymore. Rather, when people swear, they will say, by the life of Hashem, who brought us up and brought all the seed of Israel from the north and from all the lands that Hashem has sent them to, and now they will go to the land. So you see that when you have the ingathering of the exiles, and that they're coming from the north and the south and Egypt and everywhere, they're all going up to the land of Israel. So we learn from here that the land of Israel is, in fact, higher than all the other lands. Okay, all that was one baraita. Now we're going to learn another baraita that also is going to define and limit the laws to which Zaken Mamre applies. Tano Rabbanan, Zaken Mamre eno chayav ela al davar shezedono karet v'shigigato hatat divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says, yeah, I know that baraita that we just saw, it lists all kinds of different issues, whether it's monetary and capital and tuman tahara and giving to the poor, right? So those are different categories of issues, that's true. However, Rabbi Meir says, it's not for any lenient law, any simple law, you're not going to get a Zaken Mamre. Only if it's a law that, if you do it on purpose, you would be liable to karet, and if you did it by mistake, you'd get a korban hatat. So that is a very serious law. It's chayav karet. So if the Sanhedrin makes a ruling about something that has to do with karet, and the elder goes back home and he rules against the Sanhedrin, then that elder gets the capital punishment. But if it's something that doesn't get karet, it only gets lashes, or it's only alav, then that's not worthy enough, it's not serious enough to kill the Zaken Mamre. That's the words of Rabbi Meir. Now, Rabbi Meir is going to agree with the baraita that we just saw. So what we're going to do in a minute is we're going to try to figure out how can we find cases of karet in the first baraita so that Rabbi Meir could be in agreement with that baraita. Okay, we're going to get to that in a second. Rabbi Yehuda omer al davar she'ikaro midivrei Torah uferusho midivrei sofrim. Rabbi Yehuda has an in-between opinion, and he says one kills a zaken mamre only if he goes against a law that is in its essence in the Torah, but its explanation is from the words of the Sofrim. In other words, if it's just a total derabanan law and the elder goes against it, then the elder will not be liable because that's not stringent enough of a matter to kill the guy over. So only the Rabbanan law, no, not included. If it's an explicit Torah law, if he just says, the Sanhedrin says, eat pig, you're allowed to eat pig, and the Zaken Mamre goes against it, well, actually, then in that case, we're going to see later on, the Zaken Mamre has to go against the court, because that's an explicit pasuk. So if it's just a simple black and white matter, then the Zaken Mamre will not get killed for that either. Rather, when do we kill the Zaken Mamre? Only if it's something that is a deoraita law in its essence, so it's a serious matter, but the explanation of the law is dependent on the rabbis. So the point is that you need to kill the Zaken Mamre, not because he's going against the authority of the Torah. The Torah has its own authority. We don't need a law to uphold the authority of the Torah itself, but we do need a law to uphold the authority of the Sanhedrin. So if they're explaining a Torah law a certain way, then that way has to be authoritative, and we're going to back it up. So in other words, it's a serious law because it's a Doraita law, and yet it has an aspect of rabbinic commentary to explain what it is, how to do it. There's many laws like that. Torah says Shabbat. Okay, Shabbat certainly is a Doraita law, but there's so many details of how to keep Shabbat. What is a melacha and what is not a melacha? What if you had intention? What if you did it the normal way, not abnormal way? So there's tons of things. Or a sukkah. For sure, building a sukkah, eating a sukkah, that's Doraita. But how to build a sukkah, what to make it out of. So there's so many commentaries of the rabbis that explain how to do the Doraita. That's what the Zaken Mamre applies to, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon omer, afilu dikduk echad medikdukei sofrim. Rabbi Shimon has the opposite extreme. And he says Zaken Mamre applies to everything, even a little detail of the scribes, even a minor derabanan matter. Why? Because that's precisely where we need the authority of the Sanhedrin to stand. It doesn't matter if it's a stringent thing, if it's in the Torah, okay, Torah can handle itself. The point is, it's when it's a small thing, and people are likely to say, oh, it's just a small derabanan law, I don't have to follow the Sanhedrin for that, I'm going to make my own ruling. Rabbi Shimon says, no, that's precisely where we have to kill that person, because even a small matter can, if you go against the Sanhedrin, can threaten to undermine the authority of the Sanhedrin. So that's the three opinions. Now we're going to bring sources. My Tama de Rabbi Meir. What's Rabbi Meir's source to say only something that's chayav karet? Kamar davar davar. Ketib hachaki palem mecha davar lamishpat. So we're going to make a gezerah shavaf, the word davar. It says regarding Zaken Mamre, if there's a davar that's unknown to you. So that's a matter is called davar. And it also says in Vayikra regarding the sin offering that's brought if the whole congregation makes a mistake, meaning if the Sanhedrin issues a wrong ruling. It says also the word davar. Now one only would bring a communal sin offering that the Sanhedrin brings if it's a matter that if you did it on purpose it would be chayav karet. If you did it by mistake, and we're talking about a case in Vayikra where one did it by mistake, one brings a korban. That's by definition. You'd only bring a korban for something that warrants bringing a korban. So since the word davar there is obviously referring only to sins that warrant a korban, so too here regarding Zaken Mamre will only kill the Zaken Mamre if he goes against the Sanhedrin in a matter matter that one would be liable to karet if he did it on purpose, or chatat if he did it b'shogeg. So that's the source for the be meir. Ve'Rebbi Yehuda al pi Torah asher yorucha adika Torah v'yorucha. Yehuda says in the paragraph of Zaken Mamre, you have to follow the Torah that they will teach you. So you need both Torah and teaching. Torah is the fact that it's a Deoraita law that's essentially in the Torah, but it also has an aspect of Yorucha, of instruction, that the rabbis are giving a definition. How do you violate this law? What is included, what's not included? And so you need both Torah and Yorucha in order for it to be serious enough that you should kill someone, but also that's relevant that you need the rabbis to come and define what the law is. Rabbi Shimon, where does he derive his view from? It says you have to follow whatever they say from that place. Whatever they say means anything, even a small matter, even a detail of a Rabbanan halacha. One would get the death penalty if that zaken contradicted the Sanhedrin. Amar leRavuna bar Chinena leRava targema li leha matnita alibad Rabbi Meir. And there's the question I referred to beforehand for Rabbi Meir. Ravuna, the son of Chinena, asked Rava, please explain to me the first Braita, the one that said ben dam ledam, ben nega lanega, all the different types of cases. Explain that to me in accordance with Rabbi Meir, who says that you're only chayav. Zaken Mamre only applies to something that's chayav karet. How can you find chayav karet in every single one of those issues? Amar le Rava Rapapa pok targemale. Now, even though Ravuna bar China asked Rava asked his own student Rapapa, you go and interpret it for him. I guess he's saying, this is so easy. Even my student can explain this to you. Rapapa, go ahead and try it. We also see how the educational system worked. A lot of times the rabbi would assign a task to the student. The student would have to figure it out on their own and then present it before his own teacher. So here's what he says. Ki paleh b'mufla she'bet din hakatuv medaber. So the first line of the Baraita, we're going through the Baraita step by step. Yipaleh means we're talking about the distinguished person of the Bet Din. Okay, so that is true no matter what. It only applies to an elder, not to a student. When we said memecha means advice, it's not just any advice about when you should go on a vacation, but rather it's halachic advice, and this is specifically referring to something that requires a lot of wisdom, like knowing how to intercalate the year and to establish the months. So that if the Sanhedrin says the month should be second Adar, or it shouldn't be second Adar, you have to listen to them. And let's say you go home and you say, even though they said me'ed 2 Adars, I say no, or the other way around, that's second Mamre. כדתנן, הן העידו שמעברים את השנה כל אדר, שהיו אומרים עד הפורים. Now, when do we intercalate the year? So, in Masechet Eduyot, there's 2 sages that testified that one can decide, the Bet Din can decide to add another month throughout the entire Adar, because others said only until Purim. The issue is that they don't necessarily know way in advance that they want to add an extra month. They might wait till Adar to see, let's say how the weather is, let's see how things are in the field, is there barley that's going to grow, because we're going to need that for Korban HaOmer, that's going to be on Pesach. So other people said, listen, you can announce that you're going to add Adar Sheni until Purim starts. But once Purim starts, we need to know, right? Is this going to be Adar Rishon or Adar Sheni? So after Purim, then you're not allowed to add another month. But these 2 sages who are quoted here say, even the whole Adar, even towards the end of Adar, we can decide that we're going to add another month and push Pesach off. Okay, so how does this relate to something that is chayav karet? As follows: Ti lahai gisa kashereh chametz bepesach, vi lahai gisa kashereh chametz bepesach. No matter what, you're going to end up permitting chametz on Pesach if you go against the Beit Din. In other words, if the Beit Din says that, you know what, only one Adar, next month is Pesach. And then the elder comes and says, no, I'm going to add another Adar. So you know what, next month is Adar, you could eat chametz next month. Now the Sanhedrin says it's Pesach and therefore you're not allowed. The elder says, oh, it's not Pesach, it's Adar. You're allowed to eat Pesach. You're allowed to eat chametz. He's going to eat chametz on Pesach, and that will be chayav karet. Or the other way around. If the Beit Din says, this next month is Adar, Pesach is going to be in 2 months. And the elder says, no, Pesach is next month. Then in 2 months comes around, the rebellious elder says, no, we already had Pesach. This is already next month. Really, it is Pesach, but it is Pesach according to the Beit Din, but the elder says it's not Pesach, go eat chametz. So either way, one will be liable to karet. So even though the matter itself regarding intercalating the year, that itself is not chayav karet, but it leads to other issues for which one would be liable to karet. Davar ze halacha, zo hilchot achad asar, ditemar, asiri, Rabbi Yochanan amar asiri kateshiri, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish amar asiri kachad asar. Davar refers to a matter of oral tradition. So here's an example of an oral tradition that will have an effect on a law that involves karet. So this is regarding the law of the 11 days. So as we said before, when a woman gets her period, then those 7 days, any blood she sees is counted within the 7 days. She has to count 7 days all together from the start of her period until the end. And then she can become tahor. After those 7 days, in other words, after she becomes purified from being an idah, for the next 11 days, any blood she sees will make her a zava. Now, it depends how many days she sees in a row. If she sees one day, let's say the first day or the 5th day or the 9th day, let's take the 9th day because we're going to see the examples towards the end. If she sees blood on the 9th day, then she will have to be prohibited from her husband and she's tameh. She has to wait the 10th day to make sure that she does not bleed the next day. That's called shomeret yom keneged yom. She has to watch herself and check to make sure that there's no blood on the 10th day. And if there's no blood on the 10th day, then she can go to the mikveh and she is then pure on after the 10th day at night. That's if she sees one day. Let's say she sees 2 days in a row. Well, it will be similar. She sees the 4th day and the 5th day. In that case, she will wait on the 6th day. 4 or 5, she looks on the 6th day to check she doesn't see blood again. If she doesn't see blood again on the 6th day, she goes to the mikveh that day and she is tahor that night. However, if she sees blood 3 days in a row, 9, 10, and 11, for example, then she is a zava gedolah. And then it's not enough to just go to the mikveh. She has to wait 7 clean days, then go to the mikveh, then bring a korban. So it makes a big difference between 2 days and 3 days. Now, here's the issue. What do you do if she sees blood on the 10th day? Well, let's take the easy cases. 9th day, we just talked about. If she sees 9th day, then she has to wait on the 10th day. She's prohibited. And she sees 9 and 10, then she has to wait on the 11th day. That everybody agrees with. What if she sees blood on the 11th day? Well, now there's no possibility that she will be a zava gedolah, because that's it. The 11th day, if she sees blood the next day, that's already dam nida. And therefore, if she sees blood on the 11th day, she's prohibited on that day, but that's it. Then the next day, she's already nida, so she can go to the mikveh that night, and then she'll go into nida period. But she's not going to be a zava gedolah. Now, here's the question. What if she sees on the 10th day? So, if she sees on the 10th day, Rabbi Yochanan says, we treat the 10th day like the 9th day. And just like if she sees blood on the 9th day, she's prohibited to her husband the next day, the 10th. So, too, if she sees on the 10th day, according to Rabbi Yochanan, she's prohibited from her husband on the 11th. Even though there's no possibility of becoming a zava gedolah, nevertheless, she has to wait the 10th and the 11th. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, however, says, we treat the 10th like the 11th. Just like if she sees on the 11th, that's it. She doesn't have to wait another day, because the next day she's going to be nida, so she's out of the zava period. So too, if she sees on the 10th, since there's no possibility that she will become a zava gedolah, she doesn't have to wait a whole day on the 11th. She can just go to the mikveh that day, and she's permitted to her husband on the 11th day. And we'll elaborate. Rabbi Yochanan amar asiri kateshi mateshi ba'esh shimur af asiri ba'esh shimur. Rabbi Yochanan says the 10th day is like the 9th day. Just like if she sees on the 9th day, she has to be shomeret yom keneged Keneged Yom, and she's prohibited on the 10th day, so too if she sees blood on the 10th day, she has to wait the whole 11th day, and she's prohibited to her husband on the 11th day. Resh Lakish says the 10th day is like the 11th day. Just like if she sees blood on the 11th day, she doesn't have to wait a whole day on the next day, because that's it. The Zav days are over, and now it's the Nida days. So too, if she sees on the 10th, she does not have to wait on the 11th day. She can be purified on the 10th day at night, and then on the 11th day, she is permitted to her husband. Now, if a Bet Din, the Sanhedrin, ruled like Rabbi Yochanan and said, okay, this woman, she saw on the 10th day, she's prohibited to her husband on the 11th day. And then the elder says, I hold like Resh Lakish. Oh, 11, you saw on the 10th day? 11th day, you're permitted to your husband. This is a violation of karet. So here's an example of a halacha. This is all halacha l'Moshe Misinai. It's an oral law, where if you disagree with the oral tradition of the Bet Din, then it will lead to the rebellious elder permitting something that the Sanhedrin said was prohibited by karet. Next, mishpat is din. This is something that's derived from a gezer hashava. What's an example of a karet law derived from gezer hashava? Din bito me'anusato. If a man has a daughter outside of marriage, from rape or anything outside of marriage, and then he has relations with that daughter, what is the prohibition and what is the punishment? Well, the pasuk doesn't say explicitly, because we have a pasuk that says a man may not be with his granddaughters, but it doesn't say daughter. So the Amarava, Amar li Rav Yitzchak bar Avudimi, Atya henna, Atya zima. So we have a double gezer hashava. It does say in the pasuk that a man is prohibited to his wife's daughters and granddaughters. It says the word henna in that pasuk and the word henna regarding a man and his own granddaughters. And therefore, by linking the two together, we learn that a man is prohibited not only to his own granddaughters, but to his own daughter, even if it's not his wife's daughter, even if it's out of marriage. And so we learn that it's prohibited. Now, what's the punishment? That we learn from zima, which it says regarding a mother and daughter, that the punishment is burning. If you do it on purpose, with witnesses and a warning, then it's serefa. Now, any law like this, like capital punishment, if one does it without witnesses, then the punishment would be karet. And so here you go. If the Sanhedrin says this is prohibited because of this gezer hashava, and a rebellious elder says, I don't agree with this gezer hashava, and no, there's not this. It's not prohibited by capital punishment and not prohibited by karet. And then a person, this will be a difference of a karet law that relies on a gezer hashava. So that's that example. Okay, going back to the Baraita, and again, we're trying to interpret every phrase in this Baraita according to the Bi Meir, who says that the law of Zaken Mamre only applies to something that is liable to karet if you do it on purpose. So ben dam ledam, ben dam nida, ledam leda, dam ziva. דם נידה בפלוגתא עקביה בן מהללאל ורבנן דתנן דם הירוק עקביה בן מהללאל מטמא וחכמים מטהרים. So regarding we have to do all three cases of different types of blood, and we have to find the machloket where it will make a difference. So this will all be problems of karet, because anytime someone is prohibited as nida, then and the man sleeps with her, then she is the punishment is karet. So dam nida, where do you see that someone might have a disagreement about that? Well, we know that Akavya ben Mahalel and the rabbis disagree in the following Mishnah in Masechet Nida. If a woman sees a green discharge, the Akavya ben Mahalel says that is tameh. We consider that nida. Hachamim say it's tahor. So if the Sanhedrin rules like Akavya ben Mahalalel, and this woman who sees green discharge will be tameh tumat nida. And if the rebellious elder says, no, I disagree, I follow, I'm gonna rule according to Chachamim as permitted. So here's a case where the Sanhedrin says chayav karet, and he goes against it. So the rebellious elder will be chayav mita. Dam leda biplukta dera velevi di temar Rav amar ma'ayan echad hu haTorah time'atu haTorah tihartu velevi amar shene ma'ayanoten nistamat tameh niftachat tahor nistamat tahor niftachat tameh. Regarding dam leda, so we know if a woman gives birth, let's say she gives birth to a girl, so any blood she sees for the first 14 days, that's going to be dam leda. That makes her tameh and prohibited to her husband. But any blood she sees from 14 days till 80 days is called dam tohad. Even though she's bleeding, it's permitted. She's permitted to her husband during that time. Now, here's the question, the machloket. Rav says that the dam leda and dam tohad both come from the same place. They're both coming from the womb, and therefore there's no physical difference between them. There's no biological difference between the bliss blood and that blood. Rather, the Torah came and said, if for the first 14 days, we consider it tameh. After that, the Torah considers it tahor. It's simply a legal designation. Therefore, according to Rav, even if she's bleeding continuously from the time she gave birth down until after 14 days, 17 days, at the point of 14 days, then the blood after that is dam tohad. Even if it's continuous, we know it's coming from the same place, it doesn't matter. The Torah says now it's allowed. So if it's continuous blood, Rav would say she is permitted. Whereas Levi says, no, dam leda and dam tohad come from two different places in a woman's body. And therefore, in order for it to be tahor, she has to stop bleeding from the time that she saw blood when she gave birth. She has to come to a stop, and then afterwards, if she starts bleeding again, only then she's tahor. So let's say she saw blood for a while, and then it stopped at some point, and then she sees blood again on the 17th day. Then she's tahor, according to Levi. But if she was bleeding continuously from before the 14th until after the 14th, well then that's continuously blood that is tameh, and therefore we cannot declare her tahor. If she's continuously bleeding, even way past the 14th day, she remains tameh because it didn't switch to the other source for the dam tohad. So if a bet din, as a Sanhedrin, rules like Levi and said, oh, this is a case of continuous bleeding, and she's tameh, even after the 14th day, this blood makes her tameh, she's prohibited to her husband. And then the Zaken Mamreh says, no, I disagree. I rule like Rav, and she's permitted. Well, that will be a difference of karet or not karet. And then, therefore, that's a case that Rabbi Meir would say that applies to a Zaken Mamreh because it involves karet. Dam ziva beplugtad Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yoshua ditnan kisheta shelosha yamim betoch 11 yom im shafta me'at la'et v'yalda hare zo yoledet bezov divrei Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbi Yoshua omer laila v'yom kelele Shabbat v'yomo sheshafta min ha'sa'ar v'lo min hadam. We can find a case where there's a dispute regarding karet within the issue of dam ziva with the machloket between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua. The case is found in Mishnah in Masechet Nida. If a woman is in labor for 3 days during the 11 days of ziva. Okay, so in other words, she's counting 7-11, and now she's within the 11 days when, if she sees blood, she would be a zava. Now here's the thing. If she gives birth, and giving birth involves bleeding, that bleeding that she has while giving birth is not considered a dam ziva. She won't be a zava, even if she sees blood for 3 days, but then gives birth on that 3rd day, then that blood does not make her hazava. So that's no problem. Here the complication is as follows. She feels labor pains and she is bleeding for 3 days. But then she stops. Shafta me'ayet la'et v'yalda. She stopped the experiencing labor pains for 24 hours, and then after 24 hours, then she gives birth. So in other words, she was experiencing labor pains on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Tuesday at noon, stopped. And all the way till Wednesday at noon. So now 24 hours went by, no labor pains. In that case, since she bled for 3 days in a row, that's considered dam ziva. And then eventually she's going to have to count 7 clean days when she can. She might be bleeding for a while, but then when she's able to, she'll need to count 7 clean days before she's permitted to her husband. That's the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yoshua says, let's say the same case, he's a little bit more lenient. It's not 24 hours like noon to noon, but rather like Shabbat, a night and a day, from sunset till sunset, just like Shabbat is sunset to sunset. And therefore, in that similar case, if she saw blood, she was in labor, seeing blood, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday until noon, and then she stopped. When it says stopped, the Gemara notes, Shaftami Nasar, she stopped from labor, but not necessarily from bleeding. So she stopped having labor pains for 24 hours until noon the next day, and then she gave birth at 1 p.m. afterwards. According to the Rabbi Yoshua, although she stopped having labor pains for 24 hours, she did not stop for an entire night followed by an entire day, because the night only, she stopped at noon, but then the night until the night starts, we don't even start counting the clock. And so she stopped the labor for an entire night, but then in the middle of the next day, she gave birth. So since a night and a day did not pass, therefore all the blood that she saw is considered all part of the birthing process, and she is not a zava, and therefore she will not have to count 7 clean days. So if a Bet Din would rule like Rabbi Eliezer, then they would require her to count 7 clean days, and she would be prohibited in the meantime. If a Zaken Mamre came and says, I follow Rabbi Yoshua, then that Zaken will permit her to be with her husband when the Sanhedrin would say it's permitted, and that is an issue of karet. So there we have that case. Next one, ben din ledin, ben dine mamonot, dine nefashot, dine makot. So din ledin is going to include monetary cases, capital cases, and cases of lashes. Dine mamonot. Now, how could monetary cases lead to an isur karet? Here, we're going to use a kind of roundabout way, which is generally monetary cases. You owe me money, don't owe me money, there's no isur karet. But it can lead to karet if one uses that money for kiddushin. So let's say you think that this is my money, right? And I got it from the other litigant, and it's my money. And I give it to a woman, and I do kiddushin. That means she is prohibited to me. So if a Sanhedrin says that this is my money, that I'm awarded it correctly, and I use it for kiddushin, and then someone goes ahead and commits adultery with my wife, with that woman, then that would be adultery. And if he did it without witnesses, it would be karet. Whereas if the Zaken Mamre would say, no, he just thinks I don't deserve that money, and so that money is not really mine because I shouldn't have won it in court. If I take that money and I give it to a woman, I say at mikodesh li, the kiddushin is not valid, and therefore if someone else sleeps with her, that's permitted because the marriage never went through. So any case of monetary dispute can lead to a karet issue if it's used for kiddushin. So that's what we're going to get to. So now all we have to do is show a case where there's a machloket regarding laws of monetary cases. Beplukta de Shmuel v'Rabbi Abhu, Amar Shmuel, Shanaim shedanu dinahem din, ela shenikrin betin hasuf. Shmuel says that if 2 judges judge a case, they're not supposed to do that. And if they do that, they called an impudent court, but their ruling is valid. So if 2 judges decide something, then although we make fun of them, they shouldn't do that, still their ruling is valid, and if I get that money is really mine. If I use it for kiddushin, it's a valid kiddushin. Rabbi Abu Amar l'dibra kol en dinehen din. Rabbi Abu says, no, everybody agrees that 2 people who make a judgment is not a judgment, it's invalid. And whatever they said, they awarded me money, they awarded me $10, that $10 is not really mine. And therefore, if the Zaken Mamre would rule according to the Bi Abhu, so he would say that money is never really mine. If I use it for kiddushin, the woman is not prohibited. And if someone sleeps with her, there's no karet. Whereas the Sanhedrin, if they rule like Shemuel, then there is karet. So that's where we see that difference. Dinei nefashot beplukta d'Rabbi v'Rabbanan. Where do we find a dispute regarding a capital case that will have an effect on karet also? It's the machloket between Rabbi and Rabbanan regarding when two men are fighting and then they hit a pregnant woman. So there's a machloket about that. The Tanya, Rabbi Omer, v'natata nefesh tachat nefesh mamon. So one guy throws a punch to the other guy, and then he hits the pregnant woman on the side, and let's say he kills her. So it says nefesh tachat nefesh. Rabbi says, well, since he didn't intend to kill her, so he only has to pay for damages, but it's not capital punishment. The Rabbanan disagree with Rabbi, and they say, although he wasn't intending to kill her, he was intending to kill the other guy. So even though he missed, still his intention was to kill someone, so he gets the death penalty. Now, regarding Rabbi, the Baraita continues, how do you know nefesh tachat nefesh means paying money? Maybe it means actual capital punishment, which is what the other opinion says. In the previous sentence, when it was talking about if he causes a miscarriage and it says give, you have to give money. So that referred to money. So here also, when it says venatata, the same verb, it must be referring to money and not capital punishment. Therefore, we can turn this into a case of karet because it's a case of money. So if the Sanhedrin rules like Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, they would say the assailant, yes, you have to pay this woman, she's dead. So to her heirs, this money, $1,000 for what you did. And so he pays that money. One of the heirs takes the money and does kiddushin with it. That kiddushin is valid. Say if they commit adultery, there will be karet. Whereas if the Zaken Mamre says, no, I disagree, I follow Rabbanan, then the assailant deserves capital punishment, but not payment. And so if he would pay, or if they would come and take that money and use it for kiddushin, then there is no kiddushin, it's not valid, and one would not be liable to karet. So you see how a capital case can have an effect on monetary case, which has an effect on karet. But the point is, it still can involve karet, and that's how we can explain it according to Rabbi Meir. Dinei makot b'plukta Rabbi Yishmael v'Rabbanan. Ditnan, makot b'shlosha, mishum Rabbi Yishmael ameru be'asrim u'shlosha. The next item on the list is lashes. How can lashes lead to a problem of karet? As follows, between machlok between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbanan. How many judges do you need on a court in order to impose lashes on someone? So it says, in the name of Rabbi Ishmael, 23. But Rabbanan say, no, you only need 3. So let's say so there's only 3 people and they impose lashes on a person. Now that person can come and say, if they follow Rabbi Ishmael, and let's say the Bet Din HaGadol follows Rabbi Ishmael, 3 people, you impose lashes on him. This was unauthorized lashes. Those 3 people have to pay for the pain and suffering and the damages. And so that money that goes to the person who was lashed is a valid payment. And if he uses that for kiddushin, then that's a valid kiddushin. And if they commit adultery, then it would be karet. Whereas, if the Zaken Mamre says, no, I follow the opinion of Rabbanan, not Rabbi Ishmael. And so, according to that, 3 people can give lashes. And so, they don't have to pay anything. That money, if it's taken and given to the victim, and the victim uses it for kiddushin, there is no kiddushin, and there is no karet. So that's how we can get from lashes to karet. Ben nega la nega, ben nega adam, nega batim, nega begadim. Now we have to deal with different types of leprosy. How can those lead to karet? This will be easy because someone who is tameh sara'at, who goes into the Bet HaMikdash, is chayav karet. So anytime there's going to be a dispute whether someone is tameh sara'at or not tameh sara'at, that can immediately lead to a difference between karet or not. So here we go. Niga adam b'plukta Rabbi Yoshua v'Rabbanan. Ditnan im baheret kadam lase'ad halaban tameh. Im sad laban kadam labaheret tahor. Safek tameh. Rabbi Yoshua omer keha. My keha? Ramarava keha tahor. So the Mishnah Masechet Nagim says, if a white mark on the skin comes before a white hair, then the person is tameh. If the white hair comes before the white mark, then the person is tahor. If we're not sure which came first, Rabbanan say tameh. Rabbi Yoshua says it's tahor. He didn't say the word tahor. He said keha, darkened. But what he what does he mean by darkened? He means it's tahor. He just used the phrase keha, but it really means tahor. So if the Bet Din Hagadol would rule that the person is tameh in accordance with Rabbanan, then if he goes into the Bet HaMikdash, he's chayav karet. If the Zaken Mamre would rule like Rabbi Yoshua and say this tahor, and he goes into the Bet HaMikdash, so then really he's chayav karet, but the rebellious elder says not chayav karet. So that's a case where a leprous spot on a skin can lead to a problem of karet. Nigai batim b'pluktad Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon v'Rabbanan. So when do we see a dispute in a leprous mark on a home, and such that anyone who goes in the home will be tameh and will get karet if he goes Bet HaMikdash, if it's prohibited? So we see in the machlok between Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon and Rabbanan ditnan. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon omer le'olam en habayit tameh ad sheyera'eh kishne girisin al shnei avanim b'shnei ketalim b'keren zavit orko kigrisin kishne girisin v'rochbo kigris. Mishnah Negaim says that Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon says it's very, very difficult to ever have a house that will get sadat, because it's not going to be tameh unless you see it has to be the size of 2 beans, and has to be on 2 stones on 2 walls, and has to be in a corner, and the length has to be the size of 2 beans and the width by 1 bean. So my tama de Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, what's his source? Ketiv kir uchtiv kirot ezu kir shu kirot have omer ze keren zavit, because the pasuk in one place says wall, and another place it says walls. So how can you have a wall that's like walls? It means it's in a corner so that it's continuous, but it is on 2 walls. And so this, if the Bet Din Hagadol would say like Rabbanan and say, no, this is tameh, even though it's not in a corner, it's still tameh. And so this person is tameh and chayav karet for going into Bet HaMikdash. And Zaken Mamre says, no, I think that halacha is like Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. And he rules that way in practice and says, you're good, you're tahor. You can go to Bet HaMikdash, then that person will deserve karet, even though the Zaken Mamre thinks it's not karet. So that's how the Batim can lead to an issue of karet. And lastly, Negai Begadim Bipluktad Rabbi Yonatan ben Abtolmos v'Rabbanan. Tetanya Rabbi Yonatan ben Abtolmos Omer Menayin lepricha bebegadim shehi tehora nemra karachat v'gabachat ba'adam v'nemra karachat v'gabachat bebgadim ma le'lan parach bechulot tahor hafkan parach bechulot tahor. The case of sadat in clothing that will relate to karet, about which there is a machloket, is between Rabbi Yochanan ben Abtolmos and Rabbanan. A Braita teaches that, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Abtolmos, he says, how do you know that if something spreads in a garment that is tahor? There is a law regarding a person. Let's say a person has a leprous spot and it's declared to be tameh, but then it spreads throughout his entire body. The Torah says, oh, it's on his whole body, he's tahor. It's kind of paradoxical, but that's the Torah law. Does that apply to clothing also? So, according to Rabbi Yonatan ben Abtolmos, it does. If you see a spot on a cloth that would be tameh, but then it spreads across the entire garment, then the garment is tahor. And he says, how do you know that? Well, he has a gezer hashava. It says karachat and gabachat regarding a person on the skin, and it says the same words on clothing. So just like regarding a person, once it spreads throughout on his whole body, all of his skin, he's tahor. So too on a garment, if it spreads to his whole body, he's tahor. But Rabbanan disagree with that. So if the Sanhedrin Gadol the rules like Rabbanan and says, no, clothing is not like a person. A cloth, if it has a leprous spot, even if it spreads through the whole thing, it's tameh. And if someone is tameh from that clothing and goes to Bet HaMikdash, he gets karet. If the rebellious elder would come and say, no, I disagree with Rabbanan, I follow the opinion of Rabbi Yonatan ben Abtolmos, and he's tahor, then you can go to the Bet HaMikdash, then that person would be liable karet according to the Sanhedrin, and Zaken Mamre is going against the high court in a matter of karet, and therefore that would fit into the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who says that one is liable to death penalty as Zaken Mamre only if it's a matter that has to do with karet. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen ve'amen.